In this particular video, we're going to be looking at Clause 8. We're looking at our value stream operations. We're looking at how we receive customer requirements. We process them through the organization, and they emerge as either a product or a service. The bulk of ISO 9001's focus is really around your Clause 8, which is your product and service realization process. So this is really where your organization makes its money, from receiving its customer requirements to producing a product and service. So let's have a look at Clause 8. 8.1 deals with planning. How are you going to plan your SHEQ management system? It also speaks of the hierarchy of controls in ISO 45001:2018, and we'll speak about that a little bit later as well. Now, here's very important. In terms of Clause 8.2, we talk about customer requirements. How do we receive customer requirements? How do they tell you what it is that they want? They want 1,000 red shirts. So you identify what the customer requirements are. You receive them and you review your ability to be able to produce that product or service. Can you actually make red shirts, or do you have production capacity in your facility? Are you able to produce it at the customer's required cost, etc.? So you identify, you receive the customer requirements, you review your ability to provide the quality products at the right time, at the right cost, etc. You then agree to accept, and you agree on the terms and conditions of the product, and you also need to speak to how you're going to manage changes. Let's look at a hypothetical situation. A customer asks for 1,000 red shirts. You design, develop, and you start planning for all of this, and then they come back and say, no, we want 1,000 red shirts, but with a green logo just over the left-hand side pocket. You now need to manage those changes. Are you still able to meet the customer requirements, etc.? So customer requirements 8.2, how we receive, review, accept, and manage changes to customer requirements throughout the product and service realization process. 8.3, again, a very, very important clause where we have a look at the design component. And again, what is the process for design? What are the inputs to the design process? Do we have samples? Do we have color matches? Do we have swatches? Do we have various different design drawings? Whatever they may be, what are the inputs to the design process? How do we identify them and manage them into the process? What will the outputs to the design and development process be? Will it be a CAD drawing? Will it be a completed sample? Will those be verified and validated within the process? In other words, are they checked and confirmed that they're meeting the input and output requirements? And again, how do you manage changes within the design and development process? In 8.4, we have a look at external providers. Now, here is where I've integrated 8.4 of ISO 9001:2015 with the contractor component, which sits in ISO 45000. So I've brought the ISO 45001:2018 and I've blended it into 8.4, the management of external providers under ISO 9001. So the management of external providers, we have a look at suppliers and contractors and outsourcing. Now, the focus here is, again, risk-based thinking. We need to apply a measure of control against the supplier, contractor, or outsourcing based on the impact that they're going to have on our organization. So we want to approve suppliers and contractors and outsourcing prior to use. We want to have a contractor onboarding process, as an example, where they've got to meet certain requirements. How do we communicate those requirements to them? How do we give them purchasing information and tell them the products and services that we're looking for? So we want to onboard them, and once the contractors and suppliers and outsourcers are approved based on the risk exposure to our organization, how do we manage those suppliers and contractors in terms of the products and services they're providing? If they provide one nut and bolt per year, we might review them once a year. But if they're providing a primary source of our raw materials or providing a primary service to our organization, we obviously want to view them and control them more regularly. So we then move on. After managing our external providers, we're looking at operational control. How do we manage operations from receiving our customer requirements through our planning department and our receiving department through to our value stream operations, which could be our manufacturing departments or the various different divisions that we have, through to our warehouse and our products and services? How do we provide operating criteria? Now, again, Here is where we apply the hierarchy of control. How do we eliminate or substitute risks? How do we provide engineering controls within our processes to be able to ensure that we achieve conforming product and service, which is one of our intended outcomes? How do we use administrative controls? What are the operating criteria, SOPs, work instructions that are available at the various different departments that tell people the various different activities and how to perform them? How do we identify and trace raw materials or product that is in production process or finished goods? How do we identify them and trace them through our organization? Preservation of product. How do we identify raw materials or product and process? How do we identify if it's susceptible to deterioration in any form? It might have a shelf life, or it might be light sensitive or heat sensitive. How do we identify those raw materials or product and process or finished goods? And how do we protect them to ensure that they don't deteriorate because we've invested a lot of money in those materials? Customer property. How do we receive customer property, such as a sample or a drawing? And how do we protect it or insure it? And if the customer wants it back, to be able to give it back to them in exactly the same way that we received it. Also, after-sales services. Once your product and service is delivered and installed, what types of warranties or guarantees or after-sales service are you going to render to your product and service, which generally needs to be defined up here when we look at our customer requirements. So we'll define our after-sales service up here, but also then how do we render that after-sales service? And we have a look at that in 8.5. 8.6, we have a look at product and service release. So from our operational processes, there are various different ways in which we need to verify or validate the type of product or service that we're producing. So what are the release characteristics for it to move from one process to the next? And what are, as an example, what are the final release characteristics that you want to have a look at, the final checks and balances that you want to do with your product and service before you hand it over to the customer? And last but not least, how do we control non-conforming product? If we identify substandard or non-conforming raw materials or product that is in the manufacturing process or finished goods, how do we identify it, isolate it, to ensure that non-conforming product does not become part of our conforming product that goes out to our customer? And again, we'll start linking the control of non-conforming product also into our improvement process. That's just an overview of Clause 8, which is our operations, our planning, our control of our SHEQ management system in order to be able to achieve the intended outcome. We trust that you enjoyed this video.